If you've been paying attention to almost anything lately, you probably have a sinking feeling that things are getting worse. People seem angrier, the news looks darker, and the general state of the world feels like a slow, downward slide. Before you accept that bleak picture, we have to ask a mechanical question. Is reality actually degrading around us at this pace, or is your brain systematically lying to you about what's out there? To answer that, let's run a quick test. Right now, shift your focus to the physical sensation of the shirt resting on your shoulders. Now, listen for the quietest ambient sound in your room. A second ago, you were entirely ignoring both of those things. Those sensations were always there, but your brain uses a mechanism called selective attention. At any given millisecond, you are bombarded with millions of sensory inputs, and your nervous system is forced to ignore the vast majority of them just to process this specific moment. Because of this biological bottleneck, we don't actually experience objective reality. We only experience the tiny, heavily edited fraction of data that our mental filter decides is worth paying attention to. Take a look at this diagram. We have a bright, incredibly detailed flower taking up most of the frame, but there's a small spider hiding right next to it. If you're like most people, your eyes darted straight to the threat. Your brain has a built-in feature called the negativity bias. It's a cognitive filter that automatically tunes your attention to danger, mathematically weighing negative information as vastly more important than positive or neutral details. This is exactly why you can scroll through a dozen glowing compliments on your work, but you'll spend the rest of the week fixating on the one slightly critical comment at the very bottom. It shows that your brain's primary objective isn't to build a happy life. Its goal is to prioritize threat detection at all costs, even if that means entirely warping your perception of reality. To see why we are wired this way, we have to look at the environment where this hardware was developed. For our ancient ancestors, filtering out positive data was a strict matter of survival. This graphic shows the high-stakes math they faced. If an early human walked into a field containing 100 delicious, safe food sources and exactly one deadly predator, a brain that focused on the positive outcome would get eaten. The brain that fixated exclusively on the negative survived to pass on its genes. This repeated focus physically changes the structure of our nervous system. Every time you notice an anxiety-provoking stimulus, your brain reinforces and thickens the neural pathways dedicated to scanning for danger. What you end up with is a self-reinforcing loop. The more anxious you feel, the more sensitive your brain becomes to potential threats, which makes you spot danger everywhere and generates even more anxiety. Chronic anxiety represents a highly successful survival mechanism designed for a high-risk environment, even if it feels like a biological malfunction in the modern world. Today, those physical predators are largely gone from our daily lives. But that biological hardware, desperately scanning the horizon for something to fear, is still running perfectly. The modern attention economy understands this entirely. News organizations and social media platforms actively exploit our evolutionary risk aversion because grabbing our attention generates profit. To farm those clicks, they feed your negativity bias a constant diet of sensationalized disaster stories. Educational pieces or positive solutions don't trigger the brain's survival instincts, so they get pushed aside in favor of whatever terrifies us most. Take a look at this historical photograph of a child suffering from smallpox. While the media pushes the narrative that the world is crumbling today, humanity has actually eradicated tangible, horrific threats like this, alongside diseases like polio and lethal tooth infections. When we consume this continuous stream of fear-based media, we are physically training our brains to manufacture an anxiety epidemic, entirely warping our baseline view of how safe the world actually is. Left on autopilot, this bias skews your perception of the news and your personal history. Mental filtering systematically removes positive events from your long-term memory while perfectly preserving the negative ones. It also drives a flawed internal logic known as emotional reasoning. If your body simply feels bad or tired, your brain immediately starts hunting for an external reason, easily convincing you that the real problem is your partner or your job. This is a bust of the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. Even thousands of years ago, thinkers were already claiming that youth were declining and society was worse than ever, demonstrating that this filter has been distorting the human record for millennia.
When you apply this same distortion to your personal life, it creates a rigged database of your own experiences. This forces you to make major life decisions based on an archive of perceived threats, rather than a balanced account of your reality. You can't delete the negativity bias from your biological code, but you can manually override it through intentional action and a tightly controlled information diet. The first step is practicing cognitive diffusion. This simply means stepping back and observing a catastrophic thought, like everything is awful, without accepting it as an objective truth. You can acknowledge the thought without buying into it. Let's look at this diagram of neural recalibration. When therapists recommend gratitude journaling, it acts as a mechanical override for your attention. It functions as a forced search query that trains your brain to actively scan for and log positive data. Because these biological biases are invisible to the person experiencing them, you also have to seek outside perspectives. Ask the people around you to point out your negative patterns, because your brain will always tell you that your anxiety is perfectly justified. Understanding how this mental filter operates gives you back control. It allows you to stop living in a manufactured state of panic, finally enabling your brain to process the abundant goodness and safety that exist right alongside the world's real problems.